Welcome back to Pale Cachexia. As night fell, they shared their meal at the little kitchen table, warmed by the nearby cozy hearth. Unlike their quiet lunch, Cena kept up a lively, mostly one-sided conversation all the while, as if she'd suddenly thought of 100 more things to say in Esther's absence. Still, it felt so comfortable, somehow. The normal pressure of acting sociable didn't seem to apply around Cena, who seemed content just to share Esther's presence, even if the older girl rarely spoke. A peace Esther had only felt before when she was alone. How unfamiliar it all was. Esther? Esther, are you alright? Earth to Esther, after they finished washing the dishes and wandering back into the parlour, Cena gave Esther a curious, slightly worried look. I think you could use some rest. You look really tired. Do I now? You did work very hard today. Did I? Did I really? She couldn't deny Cena's observation. It was becoming steadily more of a struggle keeping her eyes open, and her muscles ached from so much unexpected use. You're right. I should sleep, so I'll have the energy to go through the study more properly tomorrow. You should rest too, Cena. Thanks, but I'm a hearty girl. I can take on Mount Everest and come back down in one single night. Yes, of course, we should be able to go through the chores more quickly tomorrow, too, since you're an expert now. I wouldn't say one day of learning it would call me an expert. Well, I'll see you in the morning then, Esther. Sleep well. After pausing for a short moment, she gave a playful little curtsy with a smile, to which Esther nodded in response. But as she started to turn towards the stairs, Cena hesitated again, glancing back at Esther somewhat shyly. Esther? You probably aren't very comfortable, right? I mean, wearing your normal day clothes to sleep. Before had barely crossed her mind, but Cena was right. Her travelling outfit wasn't exactly the most pleasant thing to rest in. I think you're too big for any of my clothes, but if you'd like, I could give you one of my papa's old shirts to wear at night. That's a good idea. He was really tall, so it would be like a nightgown for you. Only if it's no trouble, of course it's not. No, not at all. If you're going to be staying here for a little while, it makes sense, doesn't it? You can't be wearing the same thing all the time. What do you mean? This is a game. I'm always wearing the same thing over and over again. That's the thing about, game characters in their universe, is that they don't contemplate the clothes that they're wearing and the fact they've wearing them for so long and stuff like that. Anyway, I'll be right back. Stay there for just a moment. Thanks. Taking off what was almost a sprint, she bounded over to the stairs, vanishing up them the next moment. Esther barely had to wait a minute before she heard returning footsteps and spotted Cena fluttering through the foyer like a white rabbit. Okay, like a rabbit, and here we are. She unfurled her huge black shirt from beneath her arm, flourishing it like a grand cape. And Esther tentatively reached out for the shirt. Even though it was probably silly of her, she couldn't shake a sense of guilt, agreeing to wear something that belonged to a person so recently deceased. I don't think so recently, 6 years, is not hugely recent. But still, it is Cena's father, so no matter how long it is, it would still feel recent. Well, you can go change in the kitchen if you like. I'll wait here. The same thing didn't seem to bother Cena, who gave Esther an eager, nearly impatient smile. Alright. Oh dear. After a brief pause, she relented, moving to retreat into the kitchen. It was quite chilly away from the fire as Esther undressed quickly, goosebumps rising from her arms as soon as she unbuttoned her blouse. Okay. Once her clothes were hastily folded up beside her, she pulled the shirt over her head, immediately thankful for the loose warmth it provided. Okay, and I see. So that is a little bit more loose. How does it look? She wandered back into the living room, hesitantly shifting her gaze over to Cena. The soft, loose fabric hung over Esther's frame like an oversized dress, her arms lost in the flowing sleeves. It smelled remarkably clean. Cena must have kept washing her father's clothes all these years. Wow. It really suits you, Esther, just like a cozy nightgown. How do you know what suits us, Cena? You keep saying things like this, which makes us feel uncomfortable, like it really suits you. I'm so glad I've met you and stuff like that. Cena gasped with delight, clasping her hands together and beaming brightly. We don't know anything about Cena, but yet Cena knows a bit about Esther. You weren't lying about it being big. She raised one arm to study her dangling sleeve, feeling so embarrassed about how ridiculous she must have looked. Still, she has to admit it was much cozier than her blouse and shirt. The shirt, they sound similar, they're spelled almost the same, but yet they cover different parts of the body. It also made Esther feel a little more at home instead of a wanderer simply staying overnight. A wanderer, you say? Like a Ronin or something like that. Thank you, Cena. I promise I'll take good care of it. Really? Ah, you don't need to be so formal, Esther. It's only just a shirt. But I'm happy you like it. Papa was always very practical, so I think he'd be glad to know his clothes were being put to good use again. You sure about that? A gentle smile crossed Cena's features, carrying a trace of both sadness and warm affection. Well, now that you've got something nice to sleep in, I suppose it's bedtime. For the both of us, good night, Esther. Sleep well. Good night, Cena. Thank you again. You don't need to thank me if that's what I do as a good hostess. When they parted ways in Cena's bedroom door had softly clicked shut upstairs. Esther lowered herself onto the couch once more. It was her second night here, but already it was starting to feel like something of a pleasant routine. Pleasant. If not for what always had to preface us. Oh yes, the watch vein. Oh no. Reaching down for where her satchel still rested on the floor, Esther pulled out the small silver watch from before. Reluctantly but methodically, she flicked the switch and pushed the needle into her arm. And siphoning out her blood before forcing the altered compound back into her vein. Around and around the hands spun until they marked a full day's worth of hours. Ouch. The syringe slipped free from her skin, leaving only a few beads of deep red behind. It was difficult to describe the strange sickly discomfort she felt during and after the process. At first there was a modicum of relief, a pleasant buzz that distracted her from the injection. But within a few moments, it swiftly turned into a nauseating weight in the pit of her stomach. A feeling like something alien and unwanted began circling her bloodstream. She had to keep doing it, for now. One day, she'd no longer be dependent on the loathsome thing. But she could only dream of when that day would finally come. Curling her legs up on the sofa, Esther huddled beneath her blankets. She felt far more comfortable in a tireless shirt, at least, though it hardly mattered, considering how deeply tired she was. But normal clothes wear is just not it when it comes to resting. Before long, the warmth of a well-deserved sleep began to drown out all of her thoughts. The weight of her mind steadily cleared, phasing into a muddy haze, until at last she was pulled into the timeless world of dreams. Here we are again with what seems like Cena's father. How are there so many of these accursed things? I thought so. Wiping the sweat from his brow with forearm, the man sighed heavily. He was only halfway through planting his potatoes, one of the staple crops he'd planned. They were taking him much longer than expected, and it was far from an enjoyable process. But with all the work I've put into this patch, I expect some damn fine produce to come out of it. But we need both sunlight and rain for it to happen. He announced sharply to the freshly tiled earth around him, which currently only offered a few sparse seedlings. Still, despite all his annoyance and grumbling, Isaiah couldn't deny the satisfaction he felt from surveying his work. Between the garden and the newly renovated manor, his old family grounds were becoming a beautiful independent refuge in the forest. At last, he would be free from the will of others, free from all the rules, structures, and arbitrary games of society. It was well worth the price of being completely alone. How did the daughter get back to him, though? That's what I want to know. Because it was said last time that Cena was given away in an orphanage or something like that, in one of his diary pieces. But here, it seems like he is alone. But how did the daughter get back to him? There's a mystery, actually. There's a disconnect here, where Isaiah probably has given away, but somehow Cena has come back. And it could be the fact that Cena has memories of her father, but Isaiah himself doesn't really have any memories of Cena. So there could be some sort of twist within the story. Well, not entirely alone. Isaiah's gaze flickered towards a small figure sitting in the grass nearby, toying with flowers and giggling with wonder at the sky. This scene was one he longed for so many times. Only in his dreams she was here too, laughing and holding their child, the sunlight glittering on their matching hair. Without her, it seemed like nothing more than a sad joke, the caricature of a clueless father played for a fool by his beloved. What's going on, and what a fool I am, he muttered bitterly to himself, tossing his shovel aside and rubbing a hand across his brow. Stuck with a child I've no clue how to care for. Okay, so my hypothesis was wrong then. Out here, guarding and labouring, when I'm nothing but a witless academic who inadvertently slew all of his houseplants by forgetting to water them. I've got myself into quite a mess this time, haven't I? His chest heaved with a long, tired sigh, and looking through the wilderness once more. As much as he tried to convince himself this was the right choice, they'd be happier out here than in the city. A sense of doubt always came creeping back to him, and like it had for so many years, the Pale's icy grip still held him in its clutches. Earlier in the year, when he was cleaning and refurbishing the manor of his new family, Isaiah had barely felt the symptoms. A wealth of energy flowed through him, and all of his lethargy was washed away by tides of excitement. But now that excitement has dissipated, and the symptoms have once again begun to take notice. He couldn't rouse himself from bed half the time, and the disease attacked him savagely when he least expected it. His last true hope for living, the only thing giving him the will to fight the Pale's onslaught, was his search for a cure. Though he could feel the hope beginning to wane too. It was one from the little Cena. The man jerked his head towards the source of that tiny voice. He kept forgetting she was even there, playing amongst the flowers. But when he looked down at the child, he saw her tiny hand outstretched towards him. A little white blossom lay in the centre of her palm, offered up to him alongside a sunny, guileless smile. And reluctantly the man lowered down to one knee. With hesitant, uncertain fingers he reached out to take her offering, holding it in his much larger palm. Papa, Papa. The girl delightedly clapped her hands, breaking into a happy fit of giggles. And Isaiah watched her for several long moments, his face contorting slightly, as if it wasn't fully sure of what expression to make. Oh dear. Oh no, what a silly girl. Like a damned babbling bork, you are. Science is a virtue, especially for children. Okay, science. This man obviously is an old-fashioned father who is like, children can only be spoken to, but they cannot speak out, sort of thing. Grumbling quietly, he shoved white flour into his pocket, then reached out to pick up his shovel once more. There was still a great deal of planting to be done. He had to take advantage of days like today, when he had the strength to work properly. No time to be playing around with flowers, certainly. Ah, don't be such a harsh man. But then again, that's easy to say when you're not in that predicament that he has, both health-wise and his situation with the family itself. With that, he set about digging again. driving his shovel into the soft earth with vehement strikes. What a strange life he had created for himself. Yeah, strange, solitary, and most likely a very difficult one indeed. There was much he had to learn, and not simply for academic curiosity, but for their survival. I like how it changed there. I like how it changed. It was a heavy pressure. Pressure! Unforgiving and merciless as nature itself. Pressure and pleasure sounds very similar, but they mean completely different things. Nor was he a young, fit man filled with vigorous energy any longer, able to finish 100 tasks in one day. But somehow he couldn't imagine going back to how life was before, in the city. Even if he never became a skilled farmer, or a decent carpenter, or an adept tailor, at least he was forging his path with his own two hands. As long as he retained that endless freedom, cherished it, grew bolder in it, and one day perhaps even passed it down to her, he could surely carry any weight on his shoulders along the way. We're back in the present. A distant rumble stirred Esther from her sleep. Her hazy, half-open eyes drifted towards the window, where a dull sky greeted her with little morning light. Dark, heavy drops sluggishly coursed down the glass, forming jagged patterns that soon dissolved into nothingness. The greyness brought back her memories of the city. Dim, cold dawns filtering through her bedroom window, minutes spent staring up past the smoky chimneys into the industrial fog that always clouds her view. Mornings, where it felt like an immense struggle to will herself upward, to muster the strength for starting a new day. She could hear her parents down below, their muffled voices greeting each other cheerfully over tea and breakfast. But as much as she dearly wanted to join them, the longer she lay there, listening to their light chatter, the more she felt removed from them altogether. A sense of loneliness so deep that it grew complacent, resigned to the fact that she would never again rejoin the unafflicted world. Unafflicted, you say? There's always so much affliction going on throughout the world, that it seems like just one more person into it would be entirely inconsequential. And the more she dwindled on the solemn thought, the less Esther felt like she wanted to rejoin such a world at all, until finally a restless sleep slowly would come to cover her in darkness once more. Who would that be? Esther, are you awake? His had seen her. Her eyelids fluttered open again. When she jerked her head upwards, she saw Sina standing beside her sofa, looking down at her rather timidly. Oh, I'm so sorry if I woke you up. I just thought I'd make some tea, so I was checking if I should put on a bigger pot for the two of us. Despite her light smile, something in Sina's tone seemed to carry a hint of worry. It sure does. Almost automatically, Esther slowly pushed herself into a sitting position. She barely realized it until her bare feet brushed the floor, sending a faint shiver up her spine. It's fine, I was already awake. You sure about that one? Really now, thank you for checking on me. Thanks, that's just what a good hostess does, oh of course. Sina looked relieved, nodding contently to Esther's words. And tea for two then, I'll go put on the kettle. What kind of kettle is it, by the way? Is it gas hob cooked or is it electronic? I doubt it's electronic around here, considering there are candles and all that. Oh, and I thought we could stay inside today. I normally do on rainy days. We could go over Papa's books and research together, maybe, if I wouldn't bother you. Oh dear, I'd be grateful for your help, Sina. There are so many books and papers, I barely know where to start. Yes, of course, I'll be happy to help. I'm so excited. But first things first, for tea, I'll go fix a pot that's perfect for a day like this. What do you mean there's a pot suited for rainy days and a pot suited for sunny days? If you don't mind, could you start the fire and light a few candles, Esther? There's a tinder box and a desk by the window. The tinder box surely has a limited amount of matches, though. With that, she turned to hurry off into the kitchen, the soft pattering of her footsteps buried beneath the drone of heavy rain. We're drowning out of this rain, Esther was thinking. The quiet ones are always ones that think the most. Again, an unconscious movement, Esther found herself raising from her nest of blankets with little effort. It caught her off guard. Normally her illness left her all but catatonic on overcast days. Perhaps her self-consciousness around Sheena was an even stronger force than her deep lethargy. Either way, it seemed best not to question it. Exactly. When you have days of good spirits, it's best to take advantage of those, because the next day it could be doom and gloom in comparison to the previous day. After changing her day clothes and fishing out the tinderbox Cena mentioned, Esther knelt down to kindle the fireplace. Once again, it is filled with fire. As soon as it flickered to life, filling the room with a warm light and steady crackling, she felt like a spark of energy lit inside her, too. So strange, how only a small fire could make such a difference. But fire in her heart, as after all, are always something that burns brightly. When Cena returned, she proudly held a fine silver tray in her hand. Not physically, but like in a more psychological term, fire in her heart. Along with tea, she brought 2 bowls of the granola she freshly made, a deliciously comforting breakfast alongside their warm drinks. They sat down on the sofa to munch together, watching the rain torrent down in sheets past the window pane. Now, I would be a very difficult customer because I have a gluten-free diet, not by choice, but by health conveniences. It was one of those heavy blanketing storms that made a person grateful to have shelter, nurturing some deep instinct to curl up inside and wait for the rain to pass. Sitting together for an unhurried meal, reassured by the warm fire and pattering raindrops but all was safe. It was a simple pleasure, but the more she dwindled on it, the more Esther found a calm, reassuring satisfaction in the moment. What are you laughing about? At one point, Cena giggled faintly, to which Esther gave her a puzzled glance. What was the laugh for? You were making a really cute, charming face just now. You're not flirting on Esther, are you? Like a little cat after they just finished a saucer of cream. Thanks. Oh my god, that's the first time I've seen that expression. Esther hastily raised her mug and took a long sip of tea, taking refuge behind a painted ceramic. Oh, I'm not teasing you. I know I make funny faces too. Really now? How can I be so sure of that matter, for goodness sakes? It just makes me happy to see you like that, since when you first arrived, okay? You looked so hollow. Do I know? Hollow? Cena nodded, lowering her gaze to where she grasped her warm mug in both hands. Yes. Hollow. Like you didn't have anything left, I suppose. Like you could knock on it and it would break. Like ceramic that has been thinned much, much more than what it should be. Like glass. From her suddenly reluctant, almost weary reply, it almost seemed like as if she was familiar with such a look. She could have been imagining things, but Esther thought she saw Cena stutter faintly, drawing close to the fireplace. And... well, since we both finished, I think I'll go wash up. This is turning a bit awkward, don't you think? She hopped up to her feet, stacking their bowls together atop the tray. Alright, I'll go upstairs and look for some books to bring down. Oh yes, you can light the candles up if you want, since it's so dark. I'll meet you back here in a bit then. With that, Cena swiveled to make her way towards the kitchen, her tray rattling softly. Her retreat seemed a little hastier than normal. Esther had the sense she was still bothered by something, perhaps a comment she made earlier about looking hollow. Despite her warm friendliness, Cena had a certain guarded side to her, a private shield and degree of separation that Esther hadn't expected. It might fade eventually, if they grew to know each other better. I think Cena believes she knows you very well already, but right now Esther felt like Cena was almost keeping her at arm's length. In a strange way. In a very, very strange way indeed. Almost like she is trying to hide something from us. But we've all got something to hide at the end of the day. After summoning the strength required to leave a warm, cozy fire, Esther forced herself out into the hallway and up the creaky stairs, each step having their own creak and rhythm to it. But when she stepped into the study, Just like before, Esther felt an oppressive, bleak atmosphere pressing down around her. In her haste to light the candle, she nearly tripped over her own 2 feet. Haste makes waste after all, and we don't want to burn this mansion down. Their glow didn't alleviate the grim darkness, but it was enough to bring Esther a little relief. Why did this room bother her so much? By all accounts, it simply looked like a normal study, albeit a messy one. There was nothing that should have set her on edge. But, examined on the side, she inwardly mocked herself for her cowardice. She was here to find a cure, not to get caught up in a silly fear of shadows. But what we don't know is what we should fear the most. What we would fear the most is what we don't know. There is no greater fear than the unknown after all, but the more she glanced around the small library, with its overflowing shelves and piles of scattered books and papers, the more daunting her task felt. The only real trail of research that Azariah left were his scattered writings. Uncovering his studies would have been far easier if they were bound together, not written on individual scraps of parchment. However, if Isaiah went through phases of studying different subjects, perhaps the journal pages stuffed into similar books would be from roughly the same period of his life. There's a thing, right? What time period were all of these journals in? But because they're not dated, it would be very difficult to try and pinpoint an exact moment. With that hope in mind, Esther returned to the spot she'd found the previous journal entry, scrolling intently over a row of dusty tomes. It didn't take long for her to spot another piece of parchment, this one tucked inside a small leather book. Eagerly pulling it from the shelf, she let the tome fall open in her palms, revealing a short page scribbled in Isaiah's hand. What does this one say, then? So Isaiah's talking about Sina. She baffles me, that little girl. Always laughing, always cheerful, always smiling and patient with me, even after I raise my voice at her. I have only seen her cry once. It happened when I brought her outside this morning, preparing to bring her to the city's orphanage. As if she somehow knew our destination, the girl instantly began to bawl and scream, a dreadful sound I should never hope to hear again. So dreadful, in fact, that I could not stomach the thought of hearing it for hours. So I was forced to cancel my trip. Wow! What a horrible man you are at times. I suppose I will keep her here for now. When she gets older, she may be useful at cleaning and tending the land with me, at least. With any luck, she will have inherited my work ethic instead of her mother's. You probably have succeeded on that regard. You're shorter this time. But it still was very important, because it mentioned about the fact that they were indeed going to the orphanage, but Sina could sense where they were going, which was very strange. Especially around her age, like, how would she know that sort of thing? Isaiah had mentioned taking Sina to an orphanage in the last journal she'd read. The 2 entries must have been written very close together. Her hunch was right. The discovery made her heart leap with excitement, even though it was only a small revelation. But if she could piece together Isaiah's path of study chronologically, as well as his inner thoughts, she might have a chance of figuring out his approach to a cure. A small note suddenly fluttered out of the back of a book. "Starting us, sir!" She bent down to grab, and her eyes drifted over to the scribbled writing. Reminder, finish reading and annotating the latest Tomb of Spirits. Any relation to the Pale still seems unlikely, but if all my alchemical and biological studies have been fruitless, what have I to lose? So the Ghosts and Spirits then. She turned the book over to glance at its cover and spine, but there was no name to be seen. However, when she opened it to its first page, a large title was stretched across the parchment in sharp letters. Talmeth, a treatise of spirits and shadows. Spirits of shadows? Oh gosh, like she witnessed earlier about shadows. For some reason, as she murmured part of the title aloud to herself, Esther felt a faint chill crawling up her spine. It was only a book on superstition and unfounded claims, surely. But if Isaiah had singled it out, maybe it was still worth scanning through. But the thing is, if you want to get to these studies of spirits in this realm, surely you would have to have academical and biological advanced knowledge and experiences to be able to then grasp the ones on the spirits, right? If you're looking to think about the things that he himself went along. Waiting not a minute further, she scooped up some of the surrounding books and loose papers on the shelf, cradling them carefully in her arms. But before she left, she had to quickly blow out all the candles, and once the gloomy darkness returned, it seemed even deeper than before. Would the spirits of shadows operate more freely when there is less light around? It's not the heat from the light that it's bad, but it's the brightness from the light that it's bad. Once she descended the stairs and returned to the warmly lit parlour, Esther exhaled a quiet sigh of relief. Cena was already waiting on the sofa, huddled up beneath a large, fluffy red blanket. "Hello, Esther. Welcome back. It's not like we left. We're into a different room. Oh, look at all these books. Here, I'll help you." She sprung off the cushions eagerly, as if Esther returned was a welcome relief for her. Yeah, it was indeed. Together they stacked up the books and papers on one end of the sofa, forming a rather intimidating pile. Cena, however, didn't seem fazed in the slightest by the tower of text, and bent down to examine the titles curiously. Natural science, astronomy, alchemy. I don't think I've ever seen any of these titles before. Wait! This book! I remember this one! Which one is that? Cena reached for the same book Esther had picked up first. The book on spirits. Yes, Papa was always reading this book and scribbling notes. I asked him about it again and again, but he never told me why he was so obsessed with it. I guess he thought it would frighten me too much. Yeah, well, little girl, I imagine it could, but with a kind of a stalwartness of Cena, I doubt it would. With a soft sigh, she sank back down onto the sofa, still holding the book with a certain reverence. When Esther settled in beside her, Cena reached out to drape the blanket around the other girl's shoulders. Wow, thank you. It's cozy. Isn't it? Reading is a lot better when you're wrapped in a blanket. How are we meant to flicker the pages in if all we are is coated in a blanket? Well then, let's see what Papa was fussing over so much. Are you ready? Okay. Fine. Wow, okay. This is a little bit close. Holding the book up so that Esther could see the pages, Cena began to read aloud, focusing on the pages her father had scribbled on the most. Before long, both of them were equally transfixed. In a strange blend of psychology, philosophy, and the supernatural, the author described how different spirits affected one's body and mind in different ways. The term spirits didn't refer solely to departed souls, but rather certain essences of the universe that manifest in concentrated forms. Indeed, some can be channeled for purposes like healing, luck, or creative inspiration. Yeah, because you also have spirits that are embedded in certain items like weapons. But most couldn't be controlled by humans. They would simply pass through the body of their own accord, or as dedicated by other factors in the environment. However, as fascinating as it was to consider, Esther listened with a skeptical detachment. With no proof beyond his own research and anecdotal evidence, the author's claims could hardly rival any real scientific study. And more importantly, Esther couldn't see any real relation to the Pale, at least not in a way that would help her find a cure. Sometimes the most unorthodox methods turn out to be the ones that we could need the most. Just as she was about to suggest they try a different book, Cena turned to a new chapter. It only lasted a single page, and the page after it was completely blank. A short warning on the study of the apparel. When her eyes roamed across the title, a small shiver ran through her body, just like it had earlier. Such a short chapter. That's interesting, don't you think? This author likes using far too many words, so he really must have run out of ideas of this one. After a small giggle to herself, Cena cleared her throat before starting to read once more. If you say so. Yeah, if you say so on this matter of reading books and stuff like that. Through the realms of spirits is indefinitely diverse. All those noted thus far have one thing in common. Their energy is ephemeral, and they will rarely affect a body for extended periods. However, there is one type of spirit that will not only invade, but overtake a human soul whenever they are given the chance. They are known as the ethereal, shades that lie completely beyond the realm of mortal understanding. I shall not write in detail of them here, for it is said that dwelling on the ethereal will often draw them to one's presence, and thus few have dared to document them. Once their attention is garnered, they will lure in their unsuspecting target without remorse, or more precisely, the target will be drawn to them inescapably, without realizing or understanding their own actions. My sole warning, then, is to avoid any study or investigation of these spirits. Do not trifle with the darker workings of nature, no matter how alluring their call may be. But the thing is, your motives for studying in the darker workings of nature may not be because of their alluring calls, but because of the benefits that it could have from them. So, the callings may not be an invite to look at the darker workings, but the darker workings could be a means towards our own call towards it. Like find a cure, for example. Some aspects of the unseen world are meant to remain untouched. After she finished reading, the parlour grew chillingly silent. For a moment it felt as if the fire's warmth had vanished, and the only thing staving off the cold air was Cena's small form huddling against Esther. Neither of them immediately spoke. Both of their gazes were still drawn to the single page, lying open beside its empty bone-white twin. Unlike most of the other chapters, where Isaiah had lined the margins with his scribbled comments, this chapter was completely devoid of any such notes. The only mark he'd left was a dark, bold outline beneath the first mention of ethereal. The thick ink blot beside it suggested his pen had lingered there for a time. Either he'd been deliberating about writing more, or else he had simply gotten lost in thought. Maybe he buried part of that knowledge with him. The ethereal. It's a pretty name, but the way he describes them is really eerie. Cena finally broke the silence. Her hesitant voice barely above a whisper. What do you suppose it means, Esther? Could they have something to do with the Pale? She offered no reply for a long time. A murky, uncertain feeling shifted briefly at the back of her mind, before she pushed it away, annoyed at her own bothersome insecurities. I don't believe in whatever he's talking about. Even if spirits like that existed, there's no reason why they'd be related to the Pale. Are you sure about that one, then, Esther? It's a disease of the body. You ease the symptoms with a tonic, not with a priest warding off spirits. The more she voiced her thoughts aloud, the more firmly Esther believed them. The lure of superstition had only tempted her in a moment of weakness, in her impatience to find a cure. But I'll still keep looking for Isaiah's notes on them. His research on spirits might have led him somewhere else important. Somewhere else, you say? Ah, you're right. Maybe Papa found another lead. A lead, you say? Something more, sturdy, if you can say it like that. Oh dear, there's a lack of capitalization at the beginning of this sentence, developers. It was easy to see the doubt on her face. Did Sia really believe in such things? She was younger, of course, but still far more intelligent and mature than most girls Esther knew. It wasn't simply a case of a naive child being afraid of ghosts. Why, then, would she give any credence to such far-fetched writings? Esther just couldn't understand it. Let's look through something else. Good idea. Yes, let's... In the brief moment of awkwardness that followed, Cena cleared her throat a little nervously. before pushing with a shy, slightly embarrassed smile. Could I ask you a favour, Esther? I really like to read one of Papa's journal pages, but what? Well, like I said yesterday, he always told me not to. She twirled a few strands of hair around one finger, letting out a rueful laugh. There were lots of things he was ashamed he'd written, he said, but he didn't want to throw them away. He needs to remember what he'd written and thought about, so that he'd never make the same mistakes again. I don't know which journals or ones he wouldn't want me reading, but maybe he could look one over quickly and see. Of course. Okay, so you're not hesitant about this, then? After briefly hesitating, Esther nodded. She was happy to do anything to repay Cena's many kindnesses, but after reading Isaiah's past journal entries, they seemed like they might be more painful for Cena than anything. Yes, indeed, it could be the case of them. Picking up a few bound pieces of parchment from the pile, Esther quickly scanned over the pages, searching for any mention of Cena that might upset the other girl. She read it. Fortunately, though, the entry she picked up seemed unrelated to family matters. It looked more like a hasty, angrily scribbled rant. The penmanship even messier than Isaiah's normal writing. Sorry. This one. Shall I read it for us? Oh, yes, please. Resting her chin on Esther's shoulder, she peered curiously at the frenzied scribbling. With a deep inhale, Esther slowly began to read Isaiah's words aloud. What does these words say, if you can decipher what his writing is? Earlier today I was reflecting upon my departure for the Academy's medical circle. At the time it was such a difficult decision, such an agonizing farewell. So this had to be in the past. Like, it had to be in the past because of the timing of it all. Like, he would have to leave the Academy's medical circle before going to this derelict manor. Now, however, I look back upon these times with awe, wondering how on earth I ever survived in such a place. I was constantly delegated research and experiments to different departments, yet nearly every completed task would always return to me with some issue. That's what it is with science. There will never be something that is perfect. There is never ever a medicine without possible symptoms. The use of faulty tools or sloppy documentation, contaminated materials, careless omission of important details, exasperated me to no end. Even the purported finest of researchers with the most spotless of records always seemed to deliver a perfunctory performance. Then, whenever I would bring my unsatisfying results before the head, he acted as if he didn't care in the slightest. On occasion he echoed my complaints with sympathetic tuttering and a shake of his head, but in the end I gathered he simply had no investment in the results. Much of the time, the head went so far as to defend their mistakes, only stopping at the edge of calling me an outright fool for caring as much as I did. Any problems I encountered were mine to resolve. Every issue would be solely mine to bear. Frustration brought me to the edge of breaking down over and over again, and only my damned refusal to concede would pull me back from the brink. And certainly, perhaps I am far too finical and needlessly worried over fine details. Despite my vanity, I realize I can be hopelessly stubborn at times. But aren't we all in our own ways hopelessly stubborn? But is it such a crime to strive for the best performance one can achieve? Absolutely not. It's not a crime at all. It shows that you want to improve. To care so passionately for beautiful results, a delicate procedure, a loving attention to detail. Can I rightly be called mad for my longing to make my envisioned perfection into a reality? Or if not perfection, then its very closest sibling, a masterpiece of planning? No. I see now with lucid eyes, leaving that hive of medicurity was truly a blessing in disguise. Whatever I can accomplish alone would no doubt be far smaller in scale than anything I could have done at the Academy, this I realize. But in the end, to be truly pleased with one's work, it must be solely a product of one's own design. That's not necessarily true. Like, you could have something that you've put together, but it would be the workings of not just you but other people. Like, let's say, making a game, for example. You have one person that does one department, another person who does another department, or a set of different departments. But it's always about the group effort at the end of the day. Like for me, for example, with this channel, it's not just been about me, it's been about the people who have watched the videos themselves. Because if it wasn't for the people who watch them, for the people who like the videos, and the people who possibly comment, like without that kind of reflection upon my own work, then it would feel like I'm always on a journey of my own. Even though the work I do is on my own, the transparency of that work is always shared for others, because that's what putting a video on YouTube does. And somehow it brings me an odd, unexpected comfort in these long days of solitary research and study, knowing I shall have no one to knowing I shall have no one to blame but myself when I'm dissatisfied. Let's see what is going on here. Cena? What are you laughing about? To Emperor's surprise, as soon as she finished reading, Cena broke out into a warm, delighted laughter. That it just sounds so much like Papa, the little rants he would always go on about over dinner. He always took himself and his work really impossibly seriously, never any slacking, always beat himself up over his mistakes. It brings back so many memories. Slowly, the bright, affectionate smile on her face began to wane. She seemed to be struggling to keep herself cheery in the face of whatever she's remembered, but it appeared to be a losing battle. Cena, your father. Hesitantly Esther bit her lip. You don't have the answer, but could I ask what happened to him? There's a deep question. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have asked. No, it's fine. Cena reached out, placing her small hand on Esther's arm reassuringly. In a way, the faint smile she wore seemed almost grateful, as if it was something she'd wanted to ask, talk about, but hadn't been able to bring it up. Yeah, some things are uncomfortable, but it feels like it's releasing something if you always kept it bottled up. At first I didn't realise he was gone. That morning, I woke up and started the day like usual, making a meal for both of us. I put Papa's on a little tray and brought it upstairs, planning to leave it outside his door, tell him I loved him, then go start my chores. But an involuntary shudder went through her, briefly interrupting her halting, quiet words. When I reached his study, I saw the door was open. For a moment I was so happy, I thought he was finally recovering, and he could come play with me and work outside again. But he wasn't in his study, or anywhere in the manor, or outside in the garden. It was like he just vanished into thin air. When I realised Papa had disappeared, I was so scared. For 3 days, all I did was search for him, everywhere I could. I didn't return to the manor at all. I only ate some berries and roots, drank from the stream and slept on leaf bed, But I never found anything. Not a single trace. Wow. There were tears starting to form in her eyes. As she spoke in an even ever fainter trembling voice, her fingers curled tightly in the fabric of Esther's sleeve. It was evident from her slightly choked words that she was holding back tears as much as possible. Just let them go. Finally, I came back home. I didn't know what to do. It seemed like the end of everything. I thought I would die of starvation or sickness or for being all alone for the rest of my life. I didn't have any tears left to cry. I just stared at Papa's door for hours and hours, wondering if I'd ever wake up from a bad dream. The only time I moved was when I heard a rustle from outside, hoping and praying it was him, but it never was. So when you came to the study initially, when you saw Esther for the first time, you must have mistaken her at first for your own father, Cena. When night came, I couldn't sleep. I hid under my blankets and listened to the floorboards creaking, over and over. She swallowed. For a long few moments, Cena was silent, but it was clear she wasn't finished, so Esther remained quiet. Then, one night, I was so exhausted I couldn't stay awake anymore. I fell asleep, a deep sleep, the kind where it feels like you only just blinked your eyes. And when I woke up, the sun was shining so brightly through my window. I can't explain it, but I felt like it was telling me to keep living. To keep Papa's memories alive by protecting all of his hard work, the manor, the gardens, the cemetery. He did so much to make us happy here. And on his desk, when I was cleaning it, I found everything he left for me. Special almanacs, maps, and guidelines, and some gold coins in case of emergency. It really made me believe he wanted me to go on without him. He didn't want me to give up. So I didn't. She finished with a numb, almost featureless expression. It stood in contrast to the optimistic nature of her words, as if she didn't fully believe them. But Esther still stands there, or sits there really, with that worried look. At first Esther couldn't think of any possible reply, so she just gingerly cuddled her arm around Sina, giving her a small comfortable hug alongside her. In response, the blonde girl rested her head on Esther's shoulder. She took a few shuddering breaths, squeezing her eyes shut for several moments, then reopening them with a long exhale. Sina? Her voice melded with a steady crackling of a fire, as low and gentle as possible. The question hurt tip of her tongue. She didn't want to distress Sina further, but the story seemed so incomplete. She couldn't help it, so she had no choice but to ask, "Are you certain that your father has really passed on? Could it be that he just went back to the city?" That is a deep question, though. Like, if the evidence is there that Sina's father left her with all the means that she needs to survive, then wouldn't that be the case that he went somewhere else? Not like he departed to the next phase of life through the afterlife and stuff like that, but just went elsewhere. He felt that Sina was grown up enough to be able to look after herself and stuff like that. Sina stared with heavily lidded eyes at the grey window pane, where the distant stormy sky still showed no sign of clearing. But on the contrary, though, he wouldn't leave all of his hard work behind. A lot of silence pressed between them, but just as Esther began to wonder if Sina had heard her question, before he disappeared, he was sick. I don't think he wanted to be alive anymore, even if he was afraid of death. Wow. I didn't know how, but I just knew. I knew he was gone, so I stopped looking for him anymore. When I accepted it, I grieved for him for a long, long time, until I could finally move on. When Sina's cheek on her shied, Esther could feel the warmth of small droplets falling against her blouse. Silently, she held the smaller girl close, listening to her breathing as it slowly grew less uneven. She couldn't say anything that would truly express the sorrow she felt for Sina. No platitudes or even words of comfort would do it any justice. There were some things that could only be shown through the warmth of a lasting hug. A reminder that someone else was there, understanding how much it hurt, even if they couldn't fully comprehend the way it felt. You can sympathize with a person when they've lost somebody, but you haven't lost somebody of the same stature. But in that same situation, you couldn't empathize with them, really, or truthfully. But in the end, it still never seemed like enough. Finally, after what felt like a very long while, Sina slowly straightened up. "And I'm sorry, Esther. We were supposed to be going through Papa's books and notes, weren't we?" She gave a small sheepish laugh, brushing some of her hair behind one ear. But thank you. Gosh, for listening, I mean. It really helps. You don't have to thank me. Oh, my goodness sakes, no returning the favour. When Esther shook her head somberly, Sina's smile actually brightened up a little. The sadness in her eyes was still apparent, but also seemed slightly less heavy than before in a way. "Well, I'm going to thank you anyway." "So we're going to thank you for your hospitality. I suppose a better thanks would be going over more of the research together, wouldn't it? There's still a lot left in the piles." "Only if you feel well enough to." I do. Physically sound. Let's go through these first, shall we? Shall we do so then? Picking up another stack of parchments, Sina laid the pages out on her lap, shuffling some of them over to Esther. At first it felt a little awkward to start up working again after their talk, but the rustling of papers and rhythm of their murmured reading helped restore a comforting atmosphere. The fire still going at the very least. To their disappointment, however, they soon realized that none of the papers were Isaiah's journals. Instead, they seemed to be his hysteric, incomprehensible notes taken from various books, scientific theories mixed in with long ramblings of the supernatural. At one point, the fire's warmth combined with the coziness of their slow-paced, quiet reading started lulling both girls to sleep. Without even realizing it, they ended up slumping on opposite ends of the sofa, dozing off peacefully. When they awoke an hour or so later, they were equally hungry. Lunch had been forgotten in the midst of their engrossed work. But Esther was more than happy to help Sina in the kitchen, and together they cooked up a well-deserved meal of savoury porridge with roasted vegetables. The two girls ate together, mostly in contemplative silence, their thoughts preoccupied by Isaiah's books and writings. Delving into his journals had left a heavy, uncertain weight in the air alongside the guilt and morbid fascination of uncovering dead secrets. But they're not truly dead if you can still discover them. Esther had no idea if Isaiah would have wanted his writings to be examined by a stranger, one who was mainly searching in her own self-interest at that, or for the cure, a cure. Basina surely knew him better than anyone else, and she seemed just as eager as Esther to explore what her father left behind. It appears a little bit of Esther's guilt, although she still had the sense of treading somewhere private, intruding on intimate thoughts that were only written down in an attempt to lighten their burden. After their meal, they returned to comb through more of Isaiah's research, stretching my arms up. But again, they meet with little success. There was one thing of interest, however. In some of the books and scattered notes on spirits, Esther noticed an unsettling trend. Torn papers and large, blacked-out lines. It almost seemed like Isaiah had hunted down specific passages and attempted to erase them, but in an erratic, frenzied manner that went beyond even his normal messiness. In an eerie coincidence, she couldn't find any other mention of the apothecary. Perhaps it just happened to be missing from the book she brought down, though an ominous sense in her gut made her wonder if that was really the case. Something strange had happened here, and the more Esther pondered it, the more she burned with a desire to explore Isaiah's unravelled mind. I'm sorry, Esther, but I don't think I could read another word tonight. Surrendering to a long, exhausted yawn, Sina stretched her arms out over her head. I don't think I can either. It's not exactly light reading. Exactly, it's very deep. You can say that again. My brain feels like it's jumbled up from all that fancy writing. They really use 100 times more words than they have to, don't they? Maybe it makes them feel smart. Maybe. It makes me feel bored. They really need to think about their audience more. I don't think it's for their audience, but for themselves. She put on a playful pout, dangling her legs over the side of the couch. With a soft thud, her foot absent-mindedly hit the side of Esther's satchel, which was still resting on the floor. Sorry, I knocked it over. Here, let me pick this up. You don't have to. It's fine, really. Basine was already on her knees, scooping up the small trinkets and notes that had fallen from the pack. Is this your watch, Esther? It's very pretty. Ooh, we're going over to a dark subject now, aren't we? Picking up the silver timepiece from the ground, Sina turned it over in her hand, studying it with curiously shining eyes. All of a sudden, Esther found herself deeply uncomfortable. It's not a normal watch. It holds my medicine. The watch part is only for tracking the time between doses. The doses? What do you... Reaching down, Esther picked up the silver timepiece from Sina's outstretched palm. Then, when her thumb atop one of the buttons, she pushed until the metal relented with a short, sharp click. Sina's eyes widened when the watch back popped open, revealing the cruelly glittering needle hidden inside. The sight of it seemed to both repel and fascinate her, but most of all concern welled in her gaze as she glanced up to Esther. You inject yourself with that? Yes, every night. And what happens if you don't? My muscles will slowly grow numb, then give out altogether. At that point, I'll still be conscious, but it's only a matter of time before I will be comatose. It's possible to survive a paralysis for a short time, but if I don't quickly get another dose, my heart will stop. All the injection does is hold the threat at bay. It will always be there, no matter what. The fatigue of the pale is not really tiredness. It's a growing catatonia and kept frozen in its earliest stage, before you lose the ability to move. She couldn't hear her own calm, detached voice echoing in her ears, describing the effects the same clinical way she had so many times before. And Cena, that's so terrible. I'm so sorry, Esther. After a moment, Esther gave her a small shrug. To her, it was largely just another part of existence, a bodily need she had to deal with, like eating or sleeping. Of course, she'd long to be rid of it, but after dealing with her pail for so long, she could barely remember what life felt like without its weight. Well, she seems more determined now. We're going to find it. A cure for the pail, a way to set you free. Esther? I promise I'll help you, Esther. I'll do anything I can. I mean it. We'll find a cure, some way or another. I know we will. Wow, Esther. As grateful as she was to hear Cena's firm, determined words, her inner doubts refused to lift. It was too easy to believe in empty reassurances. Oftentimes, they only made a later disappointment far worse than before, but she would never voice such thoughts to Cena. Thank you. Oh dear. Judging from how the smaller girl's features grows slightly chestfallen, Esther hasn't hidden her lack of faith as well as she'd thought. Yeah. After a long moment, though, she composed herself again. Well, we've done quite a lot today from being stuck inside, haven't we? Even though we napped, I'm still so tired. You should sleep then. You too, I'm tired too. You're probably right. I don't think I'll be of any more use reading these books tonight. At least the rain stopped. It should be a lovely fresh day tomorrow. I hope so anyway. Cena combed her fingers through her messy hair, letting out a sigh. Briefly, her gaze shifted over towards the watch still in Esther's hand. A flicker of worry and something almost like frustration reflected in her eyes. I hope you can rest well, Esther. I'll see you in the morning, alright? Esther nodded. Her fingers folded over the cold metal on her palm, masking it somewhat self-consciously. Thank you for the help again. Good night. No need to thank me. We're doing the same thing over and over again. Thank you. There's no need to thank me. Thank you. There's no need to thank me. Just accept one's help, please. Well then, good night. With a gentle wave, she turned to make her way back upstairs like always. And now to get changed into more proper wear. When she was gone, Esther pulled out her night shirt and began to change, savouring the loose and cosy warmth her new makeshift pajamas offered. She'd already settled into a comfortable bedtime routine, and part of her enjoyed pulling out her heavy blankets each night, making a pleasant nest for herself. And then... But somehow, when she finally sat back down and clicked open her watch, it seemed all the more difficult to bring it syringe to her arm. It wasn't as if she had a choice. The needle sank in just like always, bringing a moment of relief, before a wave of nausea crashed down onto her and washed away any sense of comfort. Does the watch have a limited supply though, or does it always have the genetics to be able to know what it needs to do, regardless of what you think is standard physical limitations, such as space? Putting it back with a shudder, she closed the watch as quickly as possible. And then, all but diving beneath her blankets, Esther cuddled herself tightly into a ball. We'll find a cure, some way or another. I know we will. If only it would be easy. If it were easy to believe those strange, heartful words. If only she truly believed a cure existed at all. Guardian. There was an achievement last time when we went into a dream. Or Harbinger of Sorrow. What does all of this mean? Okay, folks, we're going to be coming back to Senior's father in the next time around. Some quite deep conversations happened there, especially when Senior was crying a little bit about remembering her father and the way that her father either disappeared or died. But both kind of lead to the same destination. Because you could disappear to like the other side of the world and you have no idea that they would be there. But it still has the same kind of results as if that person were disappeared, because they're so far out of reach that it seems like an impossibility to see them again. But thank you all so much for watching, guys, and see you all in the next time of Pale Cachexia. Thank you all so much for watching and take care of yourselves.